All right, and welcome everyone to the Ginette Biro Podcast. I'm Ginette Biro, and with me today I have a fabulous guest, Krystle Schofield. She is a photographer, a traveler, a mom, and more specifically, a medical mom. She's got two beautiful daughters, and one of them has a rare disease. And the reason why we're talking today about this specifically is because it's about her journey through navigating some really tough spots, some challenging moments of unknowns dealing with a daughter with rare disease, and how she has found conscious choice has been a huge piece to her finding her way through it. So welcome to the show, Krystle.
Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Great to have you here. Um,
Yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit about your daughter's rare disease so we have an understanding of kind of what you're working with?
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you a little bit about sort of my journey as a rare mama. My daughter was born a few months early, and then clinically diagnosed with VACTERL, which is an acronym. It is not known how this happens. I always get asked that question. Did you know? We did not know. And among a couple other things. So it's just like, shifted our journey in the sense that all of my expectations, my first daughter was fairly easy relatively, in terms of, sort of adjusting to parenthood and any sort of health things. We never gave her Tylenol. It was like, and then we had almost a polar opposite experience. And so it was a lot about, like letting go and, spending a lot of time in hospital and really entering into like a whole new community of people and process to living and to being,
Mhm.
to parenthood, I guess.
Yeah, and I would imagine that brought like a lot of opportunities where you had to really consciously ask yourself, like, how are we doing this as a family, and how are we navigating this next thing, or a pandemic, or
Yes.
right, like just dealing differently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, we had to step into ourselves like in a big way.
Mhm.
Um, we became collectors of information, and we were really careful about who we asked for opinions from, and making sure those were people we trusted, because in the rare disease world, it's really all in discovery. Um, and parents tend to know their kids the best. So as much as you're seeking professional medical advice, you're also having to listen to yourself, because no one's giving you a clear answer ever.
Mhm.
Ever. So we had to develop our own process really to figuring out which direction to go and which choices to make. Mm,
Mm.
yeah.
So what is Vactrals? Is there I know there's many parts to it, but are
Yeah.
you able to explain a little bit about how it works, or what it
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, for sure. So it's an acronym. It is not genetic as far as we know. There's no sort of understanding as to why this happens. And it basically, the acronym stands for things that to do with the midline of the body. So parts of, the midline of the body are not formed correctly. And if you have three or more of those sort of acronyms, like vertebral anomalies, radial, so like things going on with your limbs. If you have three or more of those, then you're diagnosed with VACTERL. So
Mm.
that's sort of it. It's pretty simple. Um, so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so with her, what are some of the things that you're having to um, continually adjust with now? Like, what are some of the things that you've really had to do differently than, or things that people wouldn't really realize is different about your lives now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I think the biggest part of that has been that my journey as a mother is far different than I had ever imagined. Um,
Mhm.
I think my role as a caregiver extended far beyond, to the extent, there's sort of like we take this year of maternity leave and we're really connected with our kids. Obviously, we are always caregivers, but the extent of caregiving shifted. And then as well, having the pandemic on top of it, she's immunocompromised, which is one of our other things. And so it just sort of, I think I just had to let go of my expectations of what my journey and my life was going to look like for a long period of time. I mean, it's been 5 years and I'm still, now it's starting to fall into place, but that's been the biggest one. And for my husband as well. And we've all just learned to kind of trust ourselves and what our family needs, because it is different, and we had to create sort of boundaries and expectations, and communicate what we need to people within our world. So coming into our home, like you need to know certain things, so there's just like a different level of awareness.
Yeah. And you really, because of it being a rare disease, you didn't have like a template to follow of what it was going to be like or what it would look like for you and your family, right? Like you guys have been on a journey of discovering as it goes, and you continue to, of like, what do we need to do for this situation? How do we need to handle a pandemic in our family? How does that differ from other people and other families, right? Like it's a constant journey of conscious choice.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, from the very beginning, we realized, and even before she was born, like I realized how much, you know, even the medical world didn't fully understand what was going on. Like there were conversations happening in front of me that were, like they were discovering things right in front of me, and I was like, I'm here. And I'm sort of like listening to this process of them figuring it out, when I'm thinking like I should be relying on, I'm looking for that acknowledgement of information. And so right from the very beginning, we've realized that it's really like it's about us learning, and then it's about us listening to ourselves, and making a lot of sort of big decisions along the way. So but having to listen and really like outweigh, what's the best choice in this experience, in our journey, what's going to be the best for us and our daughters. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of go into, through your journey, you've had to confront several juncture points, if you will, of having to make some tough decisions, some big decisions, or having wild card things happen for either your family specifically or world events pertaining to your family, right? Like how it impacts your family. And we were talking a little bit before about the very human reaction of getting angry, like being angry at certain situations, angry at certain things. And I love one of the things that you mentioned to me, which was like, sometimes gratitude just doesn't work to get me out of my anger. I can't just be like, well, I'm grateful for this.
Yeah.
I sometimes need to be angry for a bit.
Yeah.
And I loved that you brought that up, because I think that speaks so much to the human side of our journey. We can't ignore the anger. We can't never get angry. We can feel it, but then consciously choose. And so how have you what have you done to move yourself through those situations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I don't have, I have an answer that's of what's worked for me. And I think everyone needs to kind of figure out what works for them in this process. But one of the things, when I'm like, when everything's going sideways in your life, for you to stop and just show appreciation for it. It's like, for me, that did not feel authentic to my emotions in the time, and not always. And, there were times when the challenging experience, we just come out of it, and so it felt more relative to be able to look back and say, wow, I'm just really grateful we're all healthy and we're at home right now. Like I'm so grateful for my bed, and find that. But when you're in it, I think it's hard to see that, like to actually see that light and that gratitude. And so there's sort of like a storm in front of you, in front of me anyways. And I found that different things like acknowledging that my anger, just simply stopping and
Mhm.
acknowledging the way I was feeling, whether it's anger, frustration, resentment, any of those big, like, nasty emotions that we all don't
Mhm.
want to feel. And realizing also now that, like, those aren't bad emotions to feel and they're telling us something.
Mhm.
That's something that took me a while. And maybe it's the way, like, society is constructed. Maybe it's how I learned as a child, but anger felt like a bad thing for me. And so, now I've learned to stop when I feel that and to actually like feel it and listen to
Mhm.
it and hear what it's telling me. And
Mhm.
then be kind to myself, in that
Mhm.
process. So, um, for me, moving is really important. So, like, I have a lot of dance parties by myself. I really
Dance
like
it
to
out.
sing. Um, or like sometimes it's just going for like a really hard run
Yeah.
or like a bike ride or just like physically moving my body
Mhm.
without overthinking it, especially when I'm really feeling in the crux of it, has been really helpful.
Mhm.
Um, and then listening to like what my inner child needs, like, hey,
Mhm.
I actually just really want to take a warm bath right now. Or I really need to crawl into bed with like some hot pads. Heat has felt really good. So just like letting yourself rest and sleep and um, small little bits of pleasure,
Mhm.
experience small little bits of pleasure, however that works for you. That has helped me to kind of come through the muck to be able to get to a place where I can acknowledge gratitude. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Those are great points. Really great points. Because I think sometimes, and I know I've been guilty of this too, like we're so hard on ourselves in a tough situation. We think we should be able to handle it. We shouldn't be angry. We should yada yada, right? Um, and we don't give ourselves what we need in those moments. I love that you brought up the inner child because sometimes it is that. Like sometimes it is exercising it out, getting rid of the anger, but sometimes it's that inner child that is like pleading for comfort. And so
Yeah.
when we have a moment when we can actually stop and ask ourselves, like, what do I need to feel comforted here? And especially I think as moms, we're so used to taking care of others, right?
Yeah.
Like make sure everyone else is okay. And then we'll just deal with ourselves when we have time. And there isn't time. There's never time. You have to make time, right?
Yeah.
And so I think to be able to ask in those moments, what do I need now for comfort, for nourishment, for whatever, and following that, even if it's something small, like you said, like heat pads or just being warm. It's
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm really cold. What I could do right now and what I have time for is to put on two sweatshirts and my baggy sweatpants, right? Like, I think I really like that you mentioned that because I think too, for a lot of people, we either busy ourselves through challenging situations, we just stay busy, right? Or we stay working, we're too busy to think and feel the emotions.
Yeah.
Um, or for many, and I know I've done this in the past too, is spiritually bypassing, right?
Mm.
So, like, I understand the situation and I know what's going on. I realize this, so there shouldn't be an issue. And then we kind of negate our own emotions or feelings in it, right? But like you said, we still have to feel.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think like part of that too is so feeling and expressing is another
Mhm.
thing. Like, how are you expressing your emotions? And obviously anger can be expressed in ways that aren't healthy. But like one for me, when we were in times of like, survival, let's call them survival periods, um, for me it was like just not even thinking too much about the fact that I needed to sit down and write in my journal, and maybe all I could get out were two sentences.
Mhm.
Maybe that's all I had the energy for in that moment, but it was just taking that space to let something out. When we were in the hospital, initially, I started to take pictures. And so I took a picture every day of something that happened just so that I could process. So processing and remembering so that, now years later, I look back and I took these pictures and went home and I put them on the wall, and I had this massive mural in our living room. There was a photo a day of every experience we had over 3 months. And And now I didn't quite understand at the time why I was doing that. I'm a photographer and storyteller, so it kind of, it's all following my, journey. It's all
Mhm.
kind of come to a place where it makes sense. But I think that's one thing when people, when we're going through these really difficult experiences, finding a way to express them, in whatever that looks like, and be creative with that. And that can be like cooking a meal. That can
Mhm.
be, that can be anything. That doesn't have to be, mean that you're an artist or drawing, or it's just, an output.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be spiritual either, right? Like,
Yeah.
as much as I obviously talk about spiritual things and awakening and all this, part of the awakening is recognizing conscious choice, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do you consciously want to do in this situation because of, or what can you do? Like you said, if it's one sentence of a journaling thing, great.
Hmm.
If it's one picture a day and you're not quite sure why, but you're consciously choosing to do, then that's the thing in that moment, right? And I think that those actions and recognizing our emotions help us then to tap in deeper naturally to our intuition,
Yes.
right? Which then feeds back into the whole idea of spiritual, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think the more we honor self and align with self, even in moments of crisis of what is needed, like if it's 2 sweatshirts and baggy sweatpants, then
Hmm.
that's what it is. But by listening to that, we then tune into, or we make space, I think, for more of that intuitive sense. And I would imagine, like you kind of mentioned, you have then really opened your own intuitive sense and intuitive awareness,
Hmm.
having had to confront so many opportunities of conscious choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I've hit a lot of sort of barriers where I've been like, okay, I'm ready to get back into life, and I'm like, I go and things are lined up and things are happening, and then boom, something happens, whether it's like a thing that's happening to everyone in the universe, or like job loss, for example. Like, I've lost my job several times trying to get back into my career after being, you know, becoming a medical mom. Like, this is a real thing. Um and it's like, man, I thought I had it. It's that thing again, right? Back to when I was 34 and I was like, I got it lined up. I have this all figured
Mhm.
out. The plan is there. And then it over and over again. And so I've just learned that stopping when that happens, to stop and to like give yourself space to process and just step back and look at what's going on, and then really sort of see patterns in what's happening in your life, and just to start to reframe those patterns, like, uh, you know, this bad thing happened in my life and this bad thing happened in this, but then what has it taught me, and where
Mhm.
am I going next? And so that's that, I think, and learning to listen to yourself, like, for sure, in that has totally brought me to a new place, and I feel really grateful. I'm
Mhm.
super grateful for where I'm at now and the people that I've connected with, and
Mhm.
and the community that I am able to be a part of because of these bad, challenging, however you want to label them, these things that have happened in life. So that is, I think, so important, to be able to step back and just give it space and not rush onto the next thing, and just like reframe it.
Mhm.
What am I learning here, and where can I go with this?
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And I want to say too, I was just thinking of it that um, your photography has even been such a reflection of your journey too, because your photography now,
Yeah.
with you been having been on your journey, I mean, you've always been an amazing artist, photographer, all of this stuff. But since your journey, since having children, and more specifically with what diving into rare disease and the Rare Disease Foundation has done for you, is now you like focus your photography on storytelling,
Yeah.
right? Like, so when you do your photography now, you're not just looking for like nice poses or nice family shots, but you target your storytelling on the essence of moments and moments within families. I know you've done a lot for the Rare Disease Foundation, um, telling people's stories, but it's neat to see as an observer how your journey has brought you to embody more of who you are, even through your work. because
Yeah.
of everything you've experienced.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it started with the photos in the NICU,
Yeah.
documenting my own journey and then realizing the power in that, realizing the power of having an image to look back on because I think when we're going through traumatic experience, we often are not processing it in the moment. We're just experiencing it. And so for me, that was really helpful in looking back and going, oh yeah, like that was like a day. That actually happened. And I've processed those photos in a couple different ways in stories like visual, just how can I distill this down to like 10 images that tell that story of that long period of time, or creating a digital story, so like more of a short film with an actual written story that goes with it. And every time I do that, it helps me experience it in a different way, and also reframe it in a different way. And so now, yeah, the work I'm doing, I'm doing that for others, and that's in like daily life, like, hey, you're parents and this is your life at this time and this is what it looks like, and that's amazing and beautiful, and I want people to see that, the chaos and the commotion and the connection and the love that happens, like all of it. So I do that for families, and then yeah, I've been doing some work with the Rare Disease Foundation, which is really feels really good to be helping the community of people that I've connected with tell stories and share their experience, but also be able to, through that, reframe what they, where they're at. To be
Yeah.
able to see the growth that they've had through story is really powerful.
I think that's amazing. And you know what's so cool too is my guides are chatting right now and they're like, see, this is how this new kind of consciousness, if you will, or the awakening on the planet right now is really to reawaken people to the sharing of stories. I talk about it a lot. I talk about how we all have a story to tell, and we can all gain something from that sharing of it. And so it's so neat to see, like, my mode of sharing is always through speaking, right? But yours is so much through photography and now the digital stuff. Um, but it's how so many people are awakening in these different ways to raise consciousness by sharing stories in different modalities. And that this is really where the world is going. But the key piece is it is sharing of stories through wisdom gained in experience.
Yes.
Right? Like this is where this push of consciousness coming up is coming from. It's through wisdom, and wisdom can't be gained just by reading. It has to be experienced,
Yeah.
right? Or shared. And so I just find that so fascinating, right? Like how you're doing this through your journey. Like, had you not had the journey you had, you may very well not be in this point. You may still be trying to do that 34-year-old trajectory of like maybe more professional based stock photography. And maybe that's not true because you are very artistic and you would have expanded anyways, but it wouldn't have been here.
No, like I wouldn't have found here if I hadn't made conscious choice along my journey. Because looking back at it now, I'm like, oh, I made a choice, 3 years ago to go to a conference where I met this person. I met a beautiful photographer friend of mine, Christy Wolf, and she is also a medical mom, and her and I, we connected, and then she introduced me to someone who does digital, like Mike Lang, who does digital storytelling. And so I've learned from him, and I'm like, that I would never have found these people if I had just, not chosen to go out and connect and follow that path. Um, and I think that's been the beautiful part of the journey is, uh, I think there's a lot of difficult moments. There's been a lot of difficult moments, but I see that, they've led us, led our family to a place that feels really, really good. We're like connected as a unit. I feel good about, the experiences that my kids are having and the values they're learning. And I feel good about what I'm contributing to now, which I don't think it's not a job that you would find, on like a listing. It's like, it's really, I think, listening to yourself and finding a path that you're meant to be on. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
So I think we'll leave it there. I'm so grateful for you sharing your journey and your story with us. And I really hope that it inspires people to, feel the emotions and feel the situations and then consciously choose out of it, because you'd be amazed at where those conscious choices can lead you, as Krystle, you've talked about today, from some of the deepest, darkest points in your journey to a place of such light where you can then give give back from your experience. It's quite a beautiful alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Awesome. So really quickly, if people want to connect with you for your photography, where can they find you?
Yeah. So krystelschofield.com is my website. Maybe we can put it in a
Yeah,
link.
I'll put it
Yeah,
under. Yeah.
spelled differently.
Yeah.
Or at Krystle Schofield Photo on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay.
So,
Awesome. I will put those in the link below. And thank you so much for being on the show.
yeah, thanks for welcoming me. It's been
Yeah.
awesome.
Awesome. Okay. And thank you everyone for listening and joining. If you guys want to deep dive into, pardon the frog in my throat, if you want to deep dive into more consciousness, do check out avalonspirit.com, as well as the Avalon Spirit Facebook group. And I will be back again next week with more. So you guys have a beautiful week, and I will see you later.